Hello, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate you being here. Although I am kind of curious why you are here. Seriously, why are you not at the beach? Thursday afternoon? I'm surprised. But I kind of was curious if you might tell a little bit of the story as to why you decided to attend this specific seminar on ROI. So I'm going to start with you. Oh, you don't get to touch this. This ensures we get the executive summary. The longer you talk, the further I... All right.
I want to know more about how to have a better conversation with the rest of my organization about GIS.
Okay. So higher level folks, I imagine.
Higher folks, but also other business units.
Other business. Great. What about you?
Well,
you can't say you're my account rep.
I wanted to say I heard something about a guy named Wade Clues who's an amazing speaker about ROI, but actually.
All right. What about you?
It's hard to argue with numbers for communicating worth and value in what we do.
Okay,
So,
that's a good answer.
I'm somewhat sick of being called the mapper and the mapping person. And
That never happened.
And I'm ready to get serious about this and with our management and executives and implementing a company-wide solution.
Awesome. Proving your value beyond the map maker. What about you?
I want to start providing better value for the upper management at the city, in addition to just the guys out in the field.
Okay.
Let's really use GIS to run the city.
Awesome. I'll bet you're already delivering value. Part of it's just being able to communicate it to them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share? What do you think?
Yeah, we're going through some strategic planning and also curious about how best to evaluate which projects to prioritize.
Very good. Okay. Sorry, I cut you off, Amber.
No, you're not.
I'll give you one more shot. The executive summary, though, no blowing smoke.
Okay, just to be honest, so I do work with multiple agencies. I come from the government, and I want to be able to help people tell a better story about return on investment.
Awesome. So I heard a lot of telling a story, which is kind of interesting, I think anyway. Well, let me tell you why I am here, and it wasn't the speaker fees. I'm starting a campaign. It's called TrillionGISROIReports.org. Not to belittle that campaign. I think that's awesome. I think, in fact, Utah DNR has a bumper sticker that says "Trees are the answer," and I thoroughly believe that. So I encourage everybody to support that cause. But seriously, the reason I am here is because I've been in the industry for about 25 years, and just about every GIS manager that I have a chance to speak with really wish that they had more concrete evidence as to the difference that they make. But everybody winds up being too busy dealing with the whirlwind of work, and the budgets aren't there to necessarily support hiring a consultant that writes about how great GIS is. And so for the last 4 years, I've been creating a tool with the help of my colleagues at the Utah DNR that would document the examination of GIS outcomes. And I'm going to share that with you today. But first, I kind of wanted to make a distinction about how we describe our GIS successes. So I thought, if you're like me, it might be beneficial to run up a definition, a little bit of a refresher, because I wasn't exactly sure what the dictionary was saying about anecdotal. We all kind of hear it, but I thought I would give this a try and kind of give us all a refresher. So based on or consisting of reports or observations of usually unscientific observers, which I thought was pretty interesting. So every story ever told by a non-scientist, essentially, is what anecdotal is. Let's try another one. Not necessarily true or reliable, because anecdotes are based on personal accounts, stories, rather than facts or research. So now we can't believe all those stories told by non-scientists. It sounds rather harsh to me, but you can believe it because I cited the source down on the bottom like a scientist. So let's take a deeper look into anecdotal GIS successes and kind of what I mean by that. Most things we hear about and read about come in the form of anecdotes. Field apps help streamline work. We hear this kind of testament all the time. So it's very common, but usually our anecdotes are vague, and sometimes they lead to more questions than they do answers. They can be a temptation for this exaggeration because they're not backed by evidence. The story can often seem too good to be true, leading to potentially, the skepticism that can come from that. And easily forgotten. So this concept of cognitive bias suggests that common or typical statements are not remembered as well as notable and more substantiated statements. When the details of your GIS program are hard to recall, usually not specific and not well supported by evidence, you may find yourself in a serious disadvantage in the eyes of your leadership because they just don't build the type of credibility that maybe is necessary in their eyes. And lastly, we all want and need to tell our stories. So we are not going to avoid anecdotes in the future. But with these characteristics known, perhaps we need to take another look at that definition. Don't worry, you can trust it because I've got a footnote and it's a very trusted source. That statement of GIS accomplishment, your organizational leaders forgot about right after you said it. Now think about it. If your executive director is up at night worrying about budget cuts or any number of other business priorities, the anecdotal statement that states, our GIS just revolutionized data transparency, it's just not going to stick. So let me give you another one. A lost opportunity to communicate actual business data to prove your GIS did something meaningful. So recognizing the downsides of anecdotal GIS successes, the savvy GIS manager might instead choose to make a statement like this. Our new GIS open data portal reduced public inquiries to our call center by 47%. We're saving 953 hours of work, and that equates to $42,000 over 12 months. We also improved customer satisfaction scores by 28% over the last quarter. A statement like that is not common, so therefore it can be remembered. It stands out as being different and worthy of being remembered. It is specific, and the presence of organizational data suggests somebody looked under the hood and decided to figure out what it costs to do business in the organization. So yeah, I think a director would likely file this kind of a statement in the GIS saved my bacon file, that it stands out as being significantly different than what they're used to hearing. But getting from vague anecdotes to this kind of detail requires some effort. So let's use an example to discover how we might move beyond anecdotal successes into ROI territory. So we all know this publication. Some of us even get written up in any number of Esri magazines or other GIS literature. Has anybody in the room been written up by? You have? What was the name of your article? Meaningful, clearly. Okay. So, now I want to make something perfectly clear. It is not the purpose of ArcNews, ArcUser, any other GIS publication to investigate, document, and prove the business value of your efforts in any comprehensive way. While the exposure might be great, and you appreciate that, you just can't hand over these high-level summaries to your executive leadership as the only evidence that your GIS is making a difference. So I'm trying to paint the picture here that no one else but you, the GIS manager, can measure and document your GIS successes in a way that your organization needs to understand them. So let me show you what I mean with an example. Here it is. Does this article look familiar to you, sir? This was his article. And I know him. He gave me permission to do this. 1 month, thousands of assets, and 2 people. A typical article in ArcNews, it provides a good overview, but it contains anecdotes and it tells a story of challenges and the obligatory Esri solution. It's okay. We let Esri talk about their solutions. But let's examine this article and see if we can spot the anecdotes. I'll give you a few minutes to read this. Do I need to increase the font, or can you see it okay? No, I was just kidding. You only have to read the highlighted parts. Does that sound like a good deal? So let's set the context for this story. Go ahead and read that highlighted part. Now I want you to switch into your ROI mindset and put on your ROI glasses. So from an ROI discovery point of view, this is a call to action. This is a business unit's call to action specifically, as opposed to a GIS-initiated project. Clearly, this was a priority problem that required a solution. And as such, this places GIS front and center in the delivery of a critical organizational value. Again, as opposed to a data collection project that just was not on the radar of any management or leadership in the organization. You can kind of get a sense. This seemed like it was pretty important. So, this is the ROI discovery moment. This is just little clues on where we could dig deeper later. Okay, go ahead and read that highlighted part, because we're going to examine what it said about the problem's assessment. Would you agree? These are anecdotal. They don't dive very deep or explain the content or the extensiveness of the problem. Again, from an ROI perspective, what can we reveal from these statements? There must be a cost associated with this complex workflow, and it might be significant. This can be considered the current state, and it requires more investigation. And for those of you who don't know Kurt is the host of Speaking of GIS podcast, Speaking of GIS.com. Awesome guy, superhero. Is that an anecdote? Okay, so now let's take a look at the solution shaping up. So that ROI discovery moment here suggests that there may be opportunities for cost avoidance. Are there costs that need to be identified that begin to define how much the investment is being made? Things like staff labor, software, hardware, and other expenses. These are just the things that when I read these articles, I always wind up with more questions than I do answers. And so again, this is just giving you a little bit of evidence that suggests there are good places that we can dig deeper. Now let's examine the results that are mentioned in the article. The results were impressive. Anecdote. But we are beginning to see real business data for the first time. I was really excited when I saw it. It's like, yes, this is awesome. However, we can't determine the magnitude of the improvement because we don't know where they started from. Productivity was proved. Anecdote. But we are beginning to see multiple improvements on the things that the business may value. And each of these has some degree of improvement and possible return on investment. And let's not forget about quality improvements. After all, wasn't that really the reason that this started in the first place, was an issue of quality? With better data, what risks have been eliminated or reduced? Future audits, the loss of a lawsuit. With better data, can the right decisions be made faster? What are the costs associated with making a wrong decision? With better data, how much rework is being eliminated and how much more capacity or production was created? Can you begin to see how important it is to ask a lot of business-oriented questions? On the surface, this concluding statement is really encouraging. It's great news. And it actually suggests something much more significant. And that is that GIS can lead organizational change. Because folks like Kurt are demonstrating how impactful spatially enabled workflows can be. Now, the challenge is to do the work necessary to measure and document exactly how much impact is attributable to GIS. And the reason you, the GIS manager, want and need to do this is because you're the only one that can really do this, to clear the vision of your executive leadership to be able to see things in the terms in which they are used to working. Really doing this ultimately provides your organizational leaders with that degree of clarity. So where do we go from here? Besides the closest happy hour, right? Let me share with you the tool that I had mentioned earlier and begin to take a look at how you can measure and document GIS ROI. So this is a one-page Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to move through the contents of this fairly quickly, just so you can kind of get a context for what's in this. Really, after all the kind of project name and everything, we spend a fair amount of time making sure that you can dial in a really good executive summary. So like any good executive summary, you wait until the end to actually fill this part out. And then there is a description of the current workflow or the limitation, a description of the enhancement. The next thing I want to focus on is the actual number crunching and the questions that get to the organizational costs of things. So we examine the current workflow costs. So on that left, the left side of this, the gray column, this is where you put in your ROI inputs. So how many hours did it take to complete that workflow? Who did it and at what rate? And how many times a year does that particular occurrence happen? Any other ancillary costs are done there. And then on the right side, the gray column, those are calculated fields, so the math is already worked out for you. Next, we look at enhanced, same principles. How much is the cost of doing business after you introduced your improvement? And then we look at the enhancement production cost. What was that initial investment of time, people, resources, and what were the actual costs associated with that, and beginning to take a look at the initial savings. The lower half of that single page includes the ROI calculation. up at the top. The next section down is tangible benefits to the organization and tangible benefits outside the organization, because a lot of other people may benefit from this work as well. The next section deals with meaningful measures of success. The hardest part about this is measuring things, is taking the time to say, wait a second, I'm going to take a time out and I'm just going to simply establish a metric. And you have to come up with a good way to articulate and establish what this metric might be. And then there's an opportunity to record measurement observations at some point in the future life of the project. And the last section of this gives you credit. This is where you put your name, but more importantly, this is where the business unit signs off on your assumptions, your predictions, your numbers. I think it's important to state that the business unit needs to validate your claims so that you're not just a gung-ho anecdotal GIS manager that's flying off the handle saying that I'm doing all kinds of awesome things. Okay. If you are interested in this one-page spreadsheet, you are welcome to download it at this link for the next 2 days. No, I'm just kidding. We'll keep it there. It's been improved over time, so I suspect it will continue to get refined, but you are welcome to use it and abuse it and modify it to your needs. Okay, so the best way for me to share the business detail that goes into one of these GIS ROI investigations is to walk you through one. So, this is a GIS enhancement project called the Routine Technical Assistance GeoForm, and it was created for our forest stewardship program. So I better give you the high-level view of what that is. We have several foresters in the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. They are located in 6 regional offices throughout the state. The U.S. Forest Service funds this program, whereby our foresters provide technical assistance to private property owners with forested land for the purpose of better managing those forests and for conservation. So I will not be reading this whole report to you, but I believe it will be valuable for you to hear the business side of GIS projects and how they can be verbalized. So I'll read a few sections from this. So to enhance these words, I'd like you to do something for me. As I begin reading this, I actually want you to close your eyes. And I ask this for 2 reasons. It'll eliminate any visual distractions that you have and heighten your auditory processing of this information. And 2, there's not a visual that I can provide you with that will match the images that you form in your head when envisioning these business situations, okay? You guys agree to do that for me? Okay, if you do that, I promise I won't be offended if you nod off. And I promise not to put you in a hypnotic trance to make you do something that's too compromising. Okay, so the first section that we're going to take a look at is this executive summary. So to ensure that you close your eyes, you don't have anything to look at. All our division foresters conduct technical assistance under the U.S. Forest Service funded forest stewardship program, but there is no central or consistent mechanism to record this work effort. Without a uniform process for recording field notes and call-in requests, the program's data quality was inconsistent, and the resulting workflow was more laborious than it needed to be. Producing the U.S. Forest Service required annual report can take a week or more of effort. Since this program data was aggregated infrequently, the Forest Stewardship Program Manager had no way of knowing throughout the year that stewardship work, where that stewardship work was being performed, or where in the state it was. Sorry, I kind of screwed that up. The GIS team completely rebuilt this workflow and the method of storing and accessing the program's data. The solution now uses an online GeoForm that collects each routine technical assistance data record either at the forester's computer or mobile smart device. reducing this task from 30 minutes to 12 minutes, and this task is repeated 400 to 600 times a year. We've eliminated the labor-intensive data aggregation process and now use a single database that tracks the location of where assistance is provided. This is a new spatially enabled capability. Now the project manager can see on a daily basis what and where stewardship work is being done so that guidance can be provided to ensure program goals, such as the amount of assistance in forest priority areas, is achieved. The data entry process is now standardized, producing better quality data, and the creation of the U.S. Forest Service report can be done in minutes, not weeks. We now have visible management insight into this program, a more efficient and effective workflow that has resulted in avoiding 176 hours of labor and a return on investment of 138%. Okay, nap time over. You can open your eyes. Okay, so hopefully you can appreciate what the language brought to an executive so he can quickly ascertain the impact of the problem, the solution, and the solution's impact. Okay, so let's take a quick look through what the spreadsheet says relative to the ROI. So as you can see, let me see if I can get my mouse going here. We've got this part. Oh, maybe I can't do that. Okay, just follow my cursor, if you will. Can you see my cursor? No. Okay. In the uppermost gray column there on the left, half an hour is what was the workflow that was required. It was repeated 588 times because that was the number of 2016 assists. So we use that as our baseline. Extending over to the left, you can see that it has a current annual cost of about $7,000. The enhanced workflow reduced that half an hour to 0.2 of an hour with, again, using the same baseline, so they're fairly consistent, 588 times, and that had an enhanced annual cost of $2,900. The actual improvement, and this is not atypical, took 5 hours of staff work to create that geoform. So that enhancement cost was $100. The initial annual savings was $4,300, and that initial year return on investment was $138. So keep those numbers in the back of your head. Now, I want to spend a few minutes talking about math as it relates to ROI calculations for GIS projects. These are the numbers from that geoform example that we were just reading through. Using the financial definition of ROI gives us this equation. But as you might perceive, our GIS ROI was not 4,210%, was it? Can you even put a number like that into context to your top management? Does it even appear plausible? And this is why the GIS ROI spreadsheet does not use this equation. So the more conservative and appropriate equation is this. The difference is the inclusion of all costs associated with the new and improved workflow, column C. This is the variable that is needed, and it gives consideration, or it basically allows you to be, that denominator is relative to the gains or savings, the numerator. Does that make sense? That bigger denominator tempers the impact. If it wasn't, this is the result. If you vary the cost of your total improvement using the simple ROI equation, never changes. But as the cost of column C increases, your return on investment goes down. Does that make sense? So the last point I want to make about the return on investment number. Don't overemphasize it. It's an interesting characteristic about your GIS projects, but it cannot begin to explain the scope of your GIS impact. We need to dive back into the GIS ROI report to do that. The next section I want to read from is the tangible benefits to the organization. While the ROI percentage, again, is interesting, it is these benefits that reveal the ultimate organizational value of your GIS work. So, once again, if you wouldn't mind closing your eyes, I'll just read through this briefly. Benefit 1. Removed a poorly functioning workflow that left management blind for most of the year and freed up 176 hours of staff time. Benefit 2. Created standards for data entry that improve data quality and quantity. Now, foresters can track trends, this is a new capability, and determine areas that require attention, i.e. more responsive to needs and opportunities. This is new operational insight. For the first time, management has 24/7 awareness of this program's activity and progress towards operational goals. Benefit 3. Provided an application with a friendly user interface that staff enjoy using, compared to spreadsheets and numerous email communications that were necessary in the past to report activities. As a result, the program provides a more comprehensive view of staff activity and the benefits from it. Okay, you can open your eyes. Pretty powerful words, I think, I hope you agree with. So our next section covers the 2 measurement sections. So again, close your eyes for the last time. Well, not your last time. Meaningful measures of success. We can now quickly and easily query and measure the stewardship database to determine where, when, and how many technical assist records have been completed and by whom. This is a new measurement capability that can assess program effectiveness. With regards to the validation of this ROI report, we can periodically test for how much time is saved using the geoform method of data collection. Measurement observations. Date 5/2017. After only a few months of use, the total number of assist records entered into the new database is above average, suggesting the adoption of the geoform is proving to be an improvement over the previous process. Date February 2018. After 1 year, we have determined that it takes considerably less time for the foresters to process data collection using the geoform than was originally tested and measured. We now complete that process in less than 5 minutes or 0.08 of an hour. This efficiency saves approximately 231 hours of work, lowering the labor cost to perform data collection, thus providing more time for foresters to improve the state's forest and help our residents manage their forest properties. Using this new workflow cost information, the annual ROI now yields a 468% return. This is roughly translates into a workflow that operates 3.5 times better than the old way of doing business. Okay, you can open your eyes. You guys seriously ready for the nap now? Okay. So next I will read from the last section of this GIS ROI report and give credit where credit is due. This creative GIS solution to the Forest Stewardship Program and their business limitation and the reporting of this solution's impact is the work of Mr. Sean Edwards. I want to thank Sean for allowing me to share his report as part of my presentation today. I also want to recognize the contribution of Sean's manager, Mr. Buck Ehler. Buck provides his team with a very effective leadership, and he has the expectation that his staff investigate the organizational cost of doing business and then applying their spatial thinking to improve how business gets done. Part of that expectation is the documentation of the difference that they make with tangible, not anecdotal evidence. I believe these These ROI reports are so important, especially with the challenges we face today, and especially in governments. Here's a graphic that can help you visualize the challenge and that great opportunity that is in front of you. You want to know the pain of governments? Understand that demand for services is outpacing resources, and that organizational leaders must address this trend to prevent themselves from looking bad or incompetent. Perhaps a better way to state this trend is to consider the relationship between demand and capabilities. You're probably thinking this is okay, I've heard this before, do more with less. Perhaps a better mindset to approaching this gap and this opportunity is do better work faster and cheaper. The GIS professional has been doing better, faster, cheaper for a long time. We just need more validation of the difference that we make. Fill this gap with your good work. Delineate the baseline conditions and measure how your solutions close this capability gap. So, to move further away from anecdotes for your GIS successes, they must ask lots of operational and expense questions. What would management change if they could? What would make the biggest difference? The cost of doing business matters, and your understanding of business operations and their limitations is foundational to GIS success. Measure the difference that you make. Good management measures what it cares about, but also clue yourself into what the leaders are paying attention to. Write down your GIS results. Do it on something that looks official, and get the results validated by others in your organization. And share your validated value in ways that your leadership responds to. And you have to do this often. With these 4 components, what you're doing is building trust. Trust that GIS produces meaningful outcomes, and trust that you can influence and orchestrate productive change in your organization. So I want to leave you with this vision. A vision that you can play a much bigger part inside of your organization. You cannot wait for a new title to be given to you. Just do the work now that you think will make the biggest difference. When you document your GIS results, you begin to open the eyes of leadership to the valuable contributions that your GIS efforts can create and that you are personally responsible for. So with that, I will hand it over to questions. So can you guys appreciate that a 150% return on investment, 115, is a 15% increase in what was invested? Does that make sense? If you put in $100 and your total return is 115, well, you got your original investment back. Awesome. But it is a 15% increase. So just to qualify that, but also, a lot of times in government, that money would have been spent anyway. So it's not the same as a financial decision that you are determining a go, no-go decision like you would a financial investment. Okay? Does that make sense? That oftentimes those numbers, those dollars are going to be spent anyway. Okay? So it's not the same mindset as a finance person. So if you had a return of investment of 67%, should you do it? Well, my answer is it depends. Because if they were already going to spend the money anyway, I want to know what the other tangible benefits are to the organization. If it gets them closer to achieving an organizational goal, then maybe that's money well spent. It does. But what do you get for 33% more investment? Depends, right? If you can quantify what the difference is. However, really those numbers come in handy when you are comparing where you want to be, what your choices are. I have one at 7%, I have one at 67%, and I have one at 170. Again, it just helps give you some perspective that maybe you didn't otherwise have. So don't be afraid of the number possibly being a break-even number, because the tangible benefits to the organization or folks outside the organization could receive huge value from that. Not in monetary terms, because it's not all about monetary terms. But whatever those priorities are, perhaps for elected officials, for your organizational leaders, they're going to place a much greater value to a tangible benefit that hits their target than any ROI number will ever have. And so that's why I say, don't overemphasize the ROI number. It's a reference. It's a bit of a buzzword these days. And maybe I'm just, trying to ensure that GIS stays relevant by incorporating this buzzword into, my talking points. But the key is just don't overemphasize that number. Yeah. Well, if that's the case, you're going to say, what do I want to spend 75% more than what I'm already spending on? What do I get for that? If you can articulate something that is extreme value, I would say, yeah, that's a caution flag. That is, I may have other higher value projects. And let me just share with you one more slide, if it's okay. So some of you have seen this before, and the idea is that you, as GIS managers, have choices. You have choices on what projects you may choose to do. And what this diagram suggests is that of all the things you could do, and again, very simplistically, what value are you getting from that kind of a project? So this would suggest that data creation is not quite as valuable as working on and focusing on your organization's most important goal. Now again, it's a fairly simplistic model, so there are nuances to this, but what I would suggest to you is if you mapped your projects on this GIS activity pyramid, you would gain insight into where your people and your program are spending their time. Are you delivering the highest value if you are staying inside the GIS-centric portion of this pyramid? Now again, there's lots of nuances to this, but again, it just gives a point of reference, and it highlights that you as GIS managers have all much of the discretion of where you choose to invest your time. The question is, how does your organization value the results that you produce, the outcomes? I think you're right. I think it is a matter of ensuring that those big numbers will get their attention. And let's not forget about all the things that you enabled. What new capabilities you enabled. What new insight, opportunities, better service. Those go hand in hand with the dollar numbers saved. So congratulations. That's great. Could you turn this mic on? If it's turned on.
Either. There we go. Yeah. Everybody saw Sharon Stanley, the CIO from Cobb County, Georgia, on the stage on Monday during the plenary. I know Sharon. I used to work that account, and I was meeting with her in the map gallery at her booth. And I've seen a drastic increase of investment from Cobb County into their GIS. And so I just quickly wanted to ask Sharon about how does she view the business case for a large investment in GIS like she's done recently over a very short period of time. And she said, I look at three things, Adam. She said, I want to look at ways to be more efficient. I want to look at ways to bring in more revenue. And I want to look at ways for providing new services. So being more efficient is when you're probably going to look for an ROI above 100%, right? But if it's under 100%, but you're bringing in more revenue, it makes sense. If it's under 100%, but you're providing additional services to the citizens, then it's probably okay too. So if that's the CIO of a large organization viewing the three ways to look at it, that probably applies to every organization, and I thought it was a really valuable insight that I'd share.
Anybody else have anything else they'd like to talk about? Okay, well, I've got, I'm always interested. Oh, you got one?
Just curious, what are some of the measurements that you're using for the intangibles? I know we were talking a little bit about the efficiency, but what are some ways that you can measure those intangibles and present them well to executive management?
Well, that's a great question. I get that from time to time. Well, I would say any way that you can establish what that baseline condition is at least a place where you can say qualitatively you are starting from. So even though measurements can be difficult, in other words, things like customer satisfaction. Well, there are ways to test that, to gather that information. Your organization may or may not be implementing such solutions, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be done. But those intangibles, those hard to quantify components, if you can qualitatively state how you're improving those characteristics, they are definitely worth mentioning. Even if you have a hard time measuring them, and this is kind of where you can elaborate more in the measurement section of, we now have eyes on this, is at least an improvement over not having eyes on it at all. It may be intangible, but in any way that you can begin to qualify the benefits of what it is you're delivering, you do need to take credit for it. Yeah, they may not have the weight associated to the other metrics that are more easily quantified, but don't run away from them. Do try to establish the baseline condition and then talk about how things are different. Anybody else? Yeah?
One quick question about where this ROI process fits in the kind of the decision-making of the organization. Is it more of a defensive tool to defend budgets, or used in a gate process to prioritize which project moves forward?
Okay, so
both internal to the GIS and a kind of larger organization.
okay, that's a good question. So the question was, how does this ROI evaluation sit inside of the decision making within an organization, both at the GIS level and higher up? I think it winds up educating the GIS manager to the point where they become much more capable of discerning high value from low value. That experience is priceless. So inside of your own skill sets as GIS managers, your ability to quickly ascertain whether or not you're working on something significant or it is not, or there are other opportunity costs associated with going one way versus another, you'll be able to pick that up. So that's going to really help your clarity. And then as you begin to build these successes and articulate them in this, as I said, you're really building that trust. You will have more of an opening because of, I think, the relevance in which you are communicating the value, the difference that your GIS is making, that you will have an audience, more of an audience if you don't have one now, at the executive level. So you begin to prove that you can make a difference. And if you can begin to align those differences with their major priorities and their goals, then they will want to come talk to you. And I begin that you can then begin to have more confidence in stating, maybe taking the commitment that says, and Adam played a few videos this trip on showing Jack explain how somebody approached him and said, look, you give me $5 million for a CRM system, SAP, and I will deliver to you 12 million every year thereafter. But when you begin to do these ROI investigations, you will become more confident in your ability to say, hey, we've taken paper, field, data collection, we've done that. We've done it numerous times. I can tell you that, it's going to wind up having a return on investment somewhere in the X percentage. You'll just have higher confidence in yourself. So hopefully that will be the platform, the door opening for your conversations at the executive level. And, as I stated in that last slide, the vision I want to have for you all is that you can make probably a bigger impact than you think you can in your organization. I try to encourage all the divisions at DNR to incorporate a GIS professional inside of a leadership meeting. Consider them to be the thought leader when it comes to their organization's data. They know it best, and they have unique ears for spatial opportunities. All they need is to be invited into the room. They don't have to sit at the table. I don't sit at the table. I sit in the back where I like it. You don't have to have equal talking time. And what I tell people is the most valuable part of that executive leadership meeting is the 5 minutes after it's over. Because then you can approach somebody who said something and you can say, look, I heard you had this problem, this challenge. I think I have an opportunity that might solve that problem. Are you interested in a conversation? Because you were in the room. Don't trust that your higher up is going to see things the same way that you do. Even though they may, they have a higher position, they just don't think like the GIS, the spatial thinker in the organization. And I really think the more you put the evidence in front of your bosses that, look, time after time, you have both tangible, intangible benefits, and you have quantifiable results on return on investment, they should open that door for you. They just don't know how much they need you. Anybody else? Okay, I think we're just about out of time.
Yeah, we have like 2 minutes left, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.